Naming names, attorneys for the woman suing WWE founder Vince McMahon, accusing him of sex trafficking, are also accusing his lieutenants of being aware of what was happening and helping to cover it up. Two people who broke the news about the names are here. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Janel Grant filed that explosive lawsuit accusing Vince McMahon of offering her a job that was really a cover for her being a sex slave. Grant has accused McMahon of coercing her into violent sex acts and trafficking her to other men and forcing her into threesomes with his right-hand man, John Laurinaitis. Now, 4 people identified as corporate officers numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 have been revealed in a new report by Front Office Sports. WWE corporate officer number 1 is identified as WWE President Nick Khan. Number 2 is identified as WWE Chief Operating Officer Brad Blum. Number 3 is identified as Vince McMahon's daughter, Stephanie McMahon. And number 4 is identified as former WWE General Counsel Brian Nurse. It's important to note that none of the 4 are accused of assaulting Janel Grant. I want to be very clear about that. They are accused by Grant's lawyer of knowing about Vince McMahon's relationship with Grant and either taking steps to cover it up or being a part of her leaving the company and the NDA she signed, along with the $3 million payment she was supposed to receive. John Pollock and Brandon Thurston broke the news about the names behind the numbers. Guys, thanks so much for coming on. First of all, tell us a little bit about why this matters, particularly when we talk about people like Nick Khan.
Well, Nick Khan is the number 1 officer currently in WWE. He's the WWE president. At the time that these events are alleged, he was the WWE president and chief revenue officer. He's a member of the board of directors. Another person whose identity is revealed here is Brad Blum, who is the current WWE chief operating officer. So for starters, these are the 2 executives who we've learned more about in terms of what Janel Grant is alleging. Those 2 people are still very much involved with leadership in WWE.
This story, it is one of power that Vince McMahon was able to have in this position, not just from his voting shares, but within this culture at WWE. And this, does shine a light on 4 individuals that had significant titles within the company and what options were at their disposal, seeing a relationship that at the very least could be seen as inappropriate without even getting into all of the allegations in the complaint.
And let's talk about a little bit about what's alleged in the complaint as far as the names go. As far as Blum goes, Brad Blum would reach out to her. It's in, bullet point number 58. He would reach out to her and talk to her about this proposed job. She claims he would hardly ask her really any real questions. Then we move on to Brian Nurse, who was told to offer Janel Grant this job according to her complaint, although the job hadn't been firmed up yet. So it's almost like there's this implication that all of these people kind of knew that this maybe wasn't a job per se, a legitimate job, that maybe this was going to be somebody brought in who was just going to be at Vince McMahon's disposal. Is that what you guys are kind of gathering here?
And that's certainly the narrative that Janel Grant presents, is that she struck up a relationship with Vince McMahon, who turned out to be the CEO of WWE, and he wields a lot of power in his company at this time, at least. And he got her a job that they didn't necessarily have a fit for her in, but he's the boss, so he got to get her a job and got to get her the benefits that go with that job, whether or not there was really a place for her, whether or not there's really a workflow for her. That is definitely her side of the story.
And she's also kind of alleging that Brian Nurse was kind of rude to her, treated her very coldly. It was almost like she's alleging that she would walk into the room and he would be laughing and joking around with other people in this legal department where she was, supposed to be working, and that he would kind of just turn that off. Like it was almost he was hostile to her, is what she claims. So what does that tell us?
Well, I think without it really opens it up to speculation, and we did seek out Brian Nurse for comment, which he did not respond to us for this story. That was Janel Grant's characterization of Brian Nurse and someone that she was working under for a period. But you look at just what we know of in that Janel Grant is a position is essentially created for her in this legal department at $75,000 a year. And then within a year being moved up to a director position that was initially to be a VP role. And they tailored it down to a director role with the promise that a VP role would come. So it is not typical that you see that kind of a leap from $75,000 to $200,000 a year. You're seeing all these pieces here that at least, you can certainly see if you are someone in these positions that something is off here, but how much is known, it remains to be seen. And did that inform Brian Nurse in terms of his interactions with Janel Grant? That's for him to address.
Sure. And that'll eventually come out, I would think, in depositions and things like that, depending on how far this lawsuit goes. We want to thank Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring today's Law and Crime YouTube takeover. If you've seen our videos, you know that Morgan & Morgan is a proud sponsor of ours and that our content proves the world is not always safe. When you're hurt, it can be confusing, it can be scary, and you don't always know where to turn. Well, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, can help. You can submit a claim in just one click on your phone, and your injury could be worth millions. Morgan & Morgan doesn't settle for lowball offers. In just the past couple of months, they've gotten some huge verdicts. There was one for $12 million in Florida, $26 million in Philly, and $6.8 million in New York. And by the way, all of these were much higher than the highest insurance company offer. So if you are injured, you can start by easily submitting a claim at www.forthepeople.com/YouTube takeover or by dialing pound law. That's pound 529 on your cell phone. And Brad Blum apparently told her, according to the lawsuit, hey, a leap from where you are to VP, she was supposed to be a VP apparently, it was going to be a huge leap, and they said, let's dial this down a little bit and let's put you into talent relations under John Laurinaitis, who is accused of taking part in these kind of violent threesomes with Vince McMahon with Janel Grant. So this Blum is being accused of kind of knowing exactly what was going on, but kind of tailoring jobs that could be, they didn't want to raise any red flags. She's saying that he told her this could put a target on your back if we put you in a VP position too quickly.
The impression I get from that is that if we, promote you too quickly, it'll make it more obvious what's happening here. It's hard to imagine that Brad Blum and Nick Khan didn't have knowledge that there was some sort of sexual relationship between Vince McMahon and Janel Grant. There's nothing alleged, to be clear, in the complaint that those executives had knowledge of the sexual assaults that may have been happening that are certainly alleged throughout this complaint. But they are alleged to have supported and helped Vince, keep this, what the plaintiffs say is a sex trafficking scheme to keep that going along.
And we've made that clear earlier in the show that we are not saying that any of these people took part in any of the abuse of Janel Grant or what she alleges. They're accused of being part of a cover-up. So Nick Khan also was a part, according to Janel Grant, of fashioning this NDA and this agreement where she would leave the company. She was supposed to be paid $3 million. We know she didn't get all of the money. So what does this mean for Nick Khan? Let's say this turns out to all be true. What does this mean for Nick Khan, for Brad Blum? They're still with the company. What does this mean for them in the future of WWE?
I think you're getting into territory where a lot of the complaint is communication that was relayed from Vince McMahon to Janel Grant, a number of instances that infer his conversations with Nick Khan and Brad Blum. So I think that you would need to substantiate that this was Vince McMahon being truthful in these conversations and what he told Janel Grant and how involved Nick Khan and Brad Blum were privy to some of the facts and what was going on and orchestrating this. And then, kind of the confidence that these are two individuals that are still in very high, prominent leadership positions. And are they prepared that they can handle situations such as this if they were to arise? We don't have a Vince McMahon figure anymore in the company, but this is still something that you are fostering a corporate culture that there needs to be checks and balances. And if there is some kind of grand grievance to this, there has to be people that can step in and stop this from happening. I think at the core of this complaint from Janel Grant is her stating that if those structures were in place, I would have had some protections. I had none. I had no one to go to. And did this go so unchecked, this power that Vince McMahon had, that even these executives that had high-ranking positions, did they feel that they could do anything without threatening their own job title?
Mm-hmm. And if I could add to that.
Oh, sure.
If I could add to that. There's one scene depicted in the complaint where Janel Grant is describing a conversation that she had with Vince, where Vince is telling her a story about a conversation that Vince had with Nick Khan and Brad Blum, where Blum and Khan, according to Vince, expressed concern about the relationship with Janel and Vince. And they express concern, but Vince reassures them that she can be trusted, and they were eventually supportive of Vince's relationship with Janel Grant. Now, WWE has commented with some of its first comments on this story that we've had yet, and they have denied that that conversation involving Nick and Blum and Vince took place. Obviously, there's only 3 people who really know whether or not that conversation took place.
Yeah, of course. And one of them is no longer with the company. He resigned. And he's under criminal investigation. I mean, that's another piece of this, guys. The Wall Street Journal reported in the last month or so, month and a half, that Vince McMahon is under criminal investigation by the feds for sex trafficking. I know that was a Wall Street Journal exclusive. Have you heard anything more about that?
No, we are certainly with great interest, like following this, because that is like, just to frame it, like this is a civil suit, and that's the extent of things with the complaint from Janel Grant. But if we're talking about a federal investigation, especially as it pertains to sex trafficking, I mean, that is something that there could be an enormous can of worms that is opened, not just from this case, but if you are going historically in WWE, that they had an enormous scandal involving several underage ring boys in the early 90s. So this is the extent of what a federal investigation could uncover. You could only speculate at this point of how damaging it could be, and Vince McMahon being at the center of that.
And for any reassurance about, there's definitely an investigation happening. That's not just something that's been reported on background and been reported by outlets, but that there's an SEC filing that came out last year in the summer that disclosed that there is an investigation, and that Vince McMahon's his phone was there's a subpoena executed on him, and a search was executed on him. So there's definitely an investigation happening.
Mm-hmm. There is an investigation, and we want to be clear that no criminal charges have been filed, but a grand jury apparently has been impaneled, a federal grand jury, and they've been investigating this. Just finally, guys, Stephanie McMahon, Vince McMahon's daughter, she was a huge part of WWE for many years. She is revealed to be corporate officer number 3. And she is not really mentioned a lot through this civil suit. I think there's like 1 or 2 mentions of her. And she was described as, motioning to Janel Grant at maybe a meeting or 2 and saying, come sit by me. So what role does Stephanie McMahon potentially play in this at all? I mean, is Janel Grant implying that Stephanie McMahon was also aware of this relationship and was condoning it, or what is your take on that?
She's definitely saying that Stephanie McMahon had knowledge of other inappropriate sexual conduct that Vince was engaging in, allegedly. But like you said, there's very little that's mentioned here about WWE corporate officer number 3, who is Stephanie McMahon. And I would be very interested to know, what her thoughts are, what her memories are of these events that are described, and what knowledge she may or may not have had. We did reach out to her, and I feel similarly about officer number 4, who is Brian Nurse, who may have, been opposed to what was going on.
Very interesting, guys. Well, we really enjoyed reading your story, and we'll continue to follow your reporting at Front Office Sports. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for having us. And I also want to mention Tim Marchman, who worked on this story with us and was a really vital part of the reporting as well at Front Office Sports.
Definitely. Sure. I reached out to WWE's spokesperson for a comment about this reporting. So far, we have not heard back. That's it for this edition of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you back here next time. Until then, have a great night.